Hi, I'm Sloan Tuck, and this is Quinn Redmond, and we are co-owners of SK Farm LLC, and this is our podcast. We decided to talk about our value-added and growth opportunities on the farm, or what our plans for the future are. Right now, we own about 180 acres altogether. There's some people say 182. I think that's counting the house site. Anyway, we have 180 acres. We have a cow herd of about 32 now cows. And we've got 10 heifers on the way. Well, they're down in the feed ground right now. They're eating, and they're adorable. We raise full-blood Simmentals, and they're awesome. I love them. Even if I was literally just at the sale yesterday. We sold our steers yesterday. It was a long day. I'm gonna say right now. But we got them sold, but didn't do as good as I had hoped. But maybe we'll be able to change that in the future, and that might be one thing we can talk about. Okay, so welcome to our podcast. And the first thing we wanted to talk about was our changes on cattle ranching, which was, like I said again, we raised full-blood Simmentals. We originally purchased the herd in 2018, right?
I think that's right.
Yeah, that was 2018, but we weren't incorporated until the summer of 2019. We didn't decide to start a business until 2019. We kicked it around for a while, and then we started artificially inseminating in 2020 to bring in new genetics to the herd.
The reason, and to say the reason why it was new genetics is because our cattle came from my parents.
Yeah.
And they had retired and brought the heart of the herd, which was the full bloods. They had dispersed the purebreds and the percentage cattle.
Yeah, and they kept the full bloods, right?
And for approximately another 30 years, they never bought a bull. So we were inbred, and we actually have some really good genetics. On a bell curve, you will have that.
Yeah.
But we also had some that weren't. But the core of the herd was really, really strong. So when we were able to step into that herd, we looked at it as an opportunity for quality that was already there.
And also saving genetics of a breed that is becoming more and more, literally becoming harder to find in the United States.
And not only that, the diversity of the breed, it had just been range cows.
Yeah.
But when we turned it into more of a micro farm, we began to understand that our cows could be milked, and
dual purpose.
Dual purpose is what we see them as, and we see that as a growth pattern in our way forward too.
Yeah, they're great milking cows. I'll say that. They're great mothers. They do put down a lot of milk.
And they're gentle. We don't own a horse. We don't ever plan on owning a horse. We do have a side-by-side that we use.
Yeah.
But we walk our cattle where they go, and if somebody wants to walk in the front with a pail of cubes or cake, and somebody walks behind bringing along the tail draggers, then we actually put our cattle where they need to go on foot. So this idea that you can have a micro farm with extremely gentle, thick, dual purpose cattle has been an achievable goal. Now we're going to bring it forward even more with a little more diverse genetics, and we're going to be concise on our genetics. We have some goals in mind there to sharpen and direct what we want in our progeny.
Yeah, and we're actually getting there. When we first took over, what do they call it? Line breeding when it goes right, and inbreeding when it goes wrong.
Right,
is what they call it. But we were definitely hitting a severe genetic bottleneck when we took over the herd in 2018. We purchased the herd for my uncle, who took over from my grandparents, but then he ended up getting cancer and couldn't take care of them anymore. So we stepped in and we purchased them. And then my grandparents became too ill to stay here anymore in 2020, which is when we did our AI. And then 2021 was when our first AI calves came during a massive blizzard.
And it was so exciting.
It was so hard. We were throwing hay out underneath the trees, trying to keep any bedding underneath them, and then within 20 minutes it would be covered in snow again. It was so hard. And then there were some calves.
Well, we put them in the living room in a water tank.
Yeah, we put them in the living room in the water tank. We had a water tank in here, and to keep them from jumping out and peeing and pooping everywhere, we just picked them up, put them in the water tank, and then they still jumped out.
But we made it through with no death loss.
We did. And I think a big thing of that was it was so cold, none of the bacteria or viruses could really get a hold. We only had one that ultimately became our herd bull, who got a little bit of pneumonia because he'd been laying on the cold ground. We gave him a bolus for it. I thought ahead and got antibacterial boluses. We gave him one. He was perfectly fine in the morning. But for the rest of them, I really do think that we didn't have really any infections that year because the ground was so cold and that bacteria couldn't even get started in the ground.
That's one area that Sloan's really brought a lot of growth to our herd. I work in town, so she's around at the farm more than I am, and she works with Jody Beery at High Plains Vet a lot, and
Yep.
Jody's just the nicest vet tech that you could have. But in discovering what she needs for her animals, he is actually a huge benefit. He will advise her.
He's a great resource.
Yeah, and he's a resource for her, and she has, in areas of growth, we wanted to curb death loss.
Yes.
And so we didn't lose any during that storm, but we were also both here for all 3 days.
We were trapped.
This was one area that I have had to change in my work life, is to come home more and to take time away. And so that Sloan can go to college, I have stepped into,
You've been here a lot more.
I've come home a lot more, and spent more time here at the farm so that we can work with some of the issues. Calves are bringing high prices right now. It's worth keeping them alive. And Sloan has changed our fall regime with vaccinating cows and calves in the fall. Done very well. It's been a tremendous asset. And with vaccinating in the spring, we are not a family that would raw grow an animal. We simply believe in organics as much as possible, but there is times when you need to vaccinate and protect your animals from death loss through vaccinations, and we've done that, and it has been a minimum but a necessity to do so. And we also follow the norms of Bangs vaccination and that type of thing too. In our mother cow herd, our cattle for the most part are extremely healthy. In fact, we don't really have any health issues at this point.
I mean, they're so well adapted to this area because Grandma and Grandpa, they ran that full blood herd for over 30 years. 32
In
years?
retirement they ran it, but we ran it before that for all our lives.
They've been here for longer than I've been alive. They have been in this area adapting to it. Anything that couldn't adapt to this area just didn't make it, or it got sold, or it died. So what we have is an animal that's actually really well adapted to the northern plains, I would say. And how harsh it can be out here, and they make it. I'm always surprised at how resilient they are. They're really, really resilient cattle. Just heck of resilient, especially if they're getting enough calories in them. I know that's an issue in our areas. People just have a hard time getting enough calories in front of the cattle, but we always plan ahead, and we always make sure they have enough. We're always watching the weather and know when a big storm is going to come in and when we need to feed up ahead of time. And we have areas on the farm where we can go and protect them from wind chill. Then we can place their food down there.
Speaking of which, this has been wonderful. We have a protected area under
A hill.
that was an old house site, under a hill covered with Russian olives. And on that area, about 5 years
The
ago?
hill's like this, and then it comes down into almost a little garden area.
Yeah,
Well, we turned it into a garden area. That's exciting.
it's not a little garden area. It's fairly big. And so we looked over one year, and it was full of horseweeds.
Yes.
Absolutely, tumbleweeds and horseweeds. And I said to Sloan, because we were wanting a garden, Grandpa always said that if it grew good weeds, it would grow a good crop.
That was your grandfather.
My grandfather.
My great-grandfather.
Yes. And so we have developed this little piece of ground into a farmer's market. which is kind of different for
we take them into the farmer's market.
yeah,
But,
squash.
but it's about a quarter acre on this bottom of this hill, so all the water's running down into it. And
In the winter.
it was her idea. Said, what if we put squash down there? Because it's not growing grass. The cows can't really eat anything down there. It's all horse weeds.
And when we checked the ground was 5 inches of black soil.
Mm-hmm.
Come to find out, the families that had come before us, my folks had burned the shacks and small barns and the things, they burned them to the ground
Little
outbuildings when they purchased the land. So that had been done sometime before, but they had hogs and lambs in that area. And so the soil is deep and dark. We use it right now as a wintering place in the extreme storms.
Yeah.
In the event that we try to improve our rangeland, we're also going to improve our gardening land too.
Yeah.
So we winter the cows as much as possible on the top portion of our sandy ground, and we feed in hay feeders and move them so that the manure and the buildup goes into the ground, but we also go through and throw grass seed.
Yep.
You know, so that we try to seed it back. When we had drought 3 years ago,
Yes.
no, 4 years ago,
It must have been before I got. Do you think it's before 2018? Because I was
20, I think it was 4 years ago.
Because when I came back, we always had good rain until like this next year was supposed to be dry, and this year we were pretty dry.
Well, it was the year we turned out on the top part, which is our rangeland, on October 13th, because we simply did not have anything up there for the cattle to eat, and we could not ruin it with cattle just grinding it into
we
bare
had to push
dirt.
them down because we have a creek that runs through the bottom portion of our property, and that sub-irrigates the grass down there, which is really good. A lot of it's not palatable to the cows though, especially when you get further into the creek, which is something I'm trying to fix. We'll see if it works.
Sloan's got lots of new ideas.
I have lots of ideas. I drag them home. I go to college and I drag new ideas home.
One of her new ideas is what's the grandma glass? Grandma.
Well,
grass.
Blue Grandma is so expensive. I've been looking into prices, but Big Blue Stem. One thing about it that I learned during our
range tour.
Yeah, my range tour in range management this year, or intro to range management, was that Big Blue Stem can survive really well and it's very palatable to cattle, but it needs a lot of water to go and to grow and sustain itself. So I was thinking about seeding it down into our creek bottoms to see if we could get a start and get enough water to get going. So it might work, it might not, but Blue Grandma, maybe not this year, next year, because money is quite tight, but I'm hoping things get better money wise and we'll be able to afford more grasses, or maybe there'll be a grant program or something that can help us afford grasses, grass seed, so we can get the upper portion seeded and then protected to get it a chance to get up and going. But I've seen ever since we've started doing a new grazing program where we push the cattle down during the hot days of summer onto the creek bottoms and give the upper portion of our pasture a rest. One thing that I've noticed this year, and another thing I learned on my range tour, is Little Blue Stem has been coming up like crazy in the upper portion of our pasture. It's slowly coming along the sides of the hills, and then there's a huge patch of it way in the back of the pasture by these cottonwoods, and I think there might be holding more water out there. I know we had a big stand of leafy spurge that we had to go and destroy a few years ago in that area, but Little Blue Stem is coming back, which is great because it's very palatable in the summer when it's active. Now it's just little red puffs sitting out there. But another thing was when we originally took over, all our grandparents they retired and they had their own little cattle farm, and then they were doing building projects and things in their retirement because that's what they wanted to do, and nobody thought that anybody would want the cattle. Everybody was like, yeah, they'll work with the cattle until it's time for them to go to retirement home or when they pass, which we, at some point they were going to pass. Everybody knew that. But they had their little hobby farm where they were doing their cattle and doing their building projects and doing whatever they felt like doing. But when I took over, when we incorporated, together. And I came in and had all these new ideas. I wanted to get more programs on the farm going. And one of those was poultry, which has been so-so, I would say. So far, they've been providing for themselves.
Sloan would talk about in the Air Force when she ate eggs, she would get such a terrible tummy ache.
I would get sick.
Yeah, she would get sick, and she didn't know why. And eggs are, you wouldn't think you would get that sick from eggs, but they didn't sit well with her. And so she wanted to have a natural egg, and she wanted to experience raising chickens. I didn't want that. I was very upfront about not having any interest in poultry.
The other thing is that the doctor said Grandpa can't have any more beef. And that's what we raised. And I was like, oh no. And then the chicken in the grocery store, not that it's bad, but I was hoping to get better quality chicken. I'm like, well, maybe if I raised it myself, it would be better. And then we got eggs. We started with black Americanas, which I still love those birds. I love those birds. They're great. They're very well adapted to the cold up here. And then we also have buff Brahmas. And then I have one crossbreed this year who is very cold hardy. He's a tough boy. But I think we might keep going with that crossbreeding program and see if we can't get some real cold hardy birds that are just tough as heck. But so far they've been providing themselves with eggs. They produce eggs, and they've been managing to get through most of the winter, and during the year they're able to cover their own expenses. But I do think we need to expand, and that there is a want for...
Well, when you say they cover their own expenses,
For
how
the
do
most
you
part.
recover that? Eggs?
Yeah.
We also grow turkeys. Stoney has picked up turkeys, and they are delicious. We had never butchered turkeys.
No, that was a whole new thing.
We had never butchered turkeys.
Yeah, it was a lot, because we had to learn how to butcher chickens first, because neither of us had ever done it before. And I had to look up videos and buy cones and build a little chute where we can stick the cones, cut the throat, drain the blood, and all that. I had to build that.
And I told her my father made me do many things, or had us do, as we grew up, but one of them was not chickens. It was, and she drags these chickens home and decides we have to do chickens. Guess who gets to cut their throat?
Hey, I do most everything else. I'm really good at eviscerating now.
Yes, she is. She's
very good at eviscerating. Although I could use a spoon with a really sharp edge to get all the little kidneys out. The kidneys are the hardest part to get out. The kidneys are stuck in there good, and then they explode if you try pulling them too hard.
But I will have to say, in terms of organic meat and meat diversity on our farm, the turkeys are wonderful. This, for an area of growth, I have suggested, and we talk about dragging each other forward.
Yeah.
Because we kind of battle back and forth about issues.
Yeah.
But I would like to see less of the like the bitter, what's the ones from Big Timber? Bitter.
Oh,
the bitter root, not bitter root.
No, not the bitter roots. Oh gosh,
they're more of a wild turkey breed.
Yeah.
Where some of our white New Holland,
the White Hollands have worked out really well,
and they stay closer to the house, which allows our guard dogs. And Sloney brought those into the operation too.
We had to get guard dogs
because the coyotes out here are
vicious.
Well, they're just too healthy.
Yeah,
they need to be less healthy, and so the guard dogs help with. We don't exactly keep all our chickens. We lose some every now and then.
Yeah.
But the turkeys, the hens that want to range out and make nests out in the bushes and stuff, get eaten.
Yeah.
They just do. In the
White Holland
females stay close.
Stay right where they need to be. They make a nest in the chicken coop, and they're like, "This is my eggs. I will sit on all the eggs." One of them hatched out more chicks than I did this year, and I was jealous.
And they're bigger. They're bigger, like
big breast,
meat birds.
Good breast, good body size. Definitely can get them up to 40 pounds or a little bit more. They are slower growing than, say, a broad-breasted, but I don't think a broad-breasted could escape a coyote if one came in. That's my concern.
I think we should try some broad-breasted to see what they do. And Sloan's like, nope.
Well, if some go on sale this year, Tractor Supply or something, I don't see why we couldn't get them. But they're probably going to have a higher eating rate than the White Hollands. It's my concern, because we put them out because we have such a grasshopper problem, and they are able to eat so many more grasshoppers and clean out our gardens of grasshoppers faster than chickens are, and they are easier on the plants, I find, because they don't go after the plants as much. Chickens will go after your fruits and your vegetables. Turkeys not so much. They want that protein, and they'll fly in there, and they might take a nibble here and there, but mostly they're just going after the grasshoppers. And I brought them in as grasshopper control originally.
Right. And then we decided we'd eat them.
Yep. and they're good. You just
They're
gotta brine
really-
them. You just gotta brine them first. You gotta give them 12 to 4 hour brine. And I did one overnight the other night, and it tastes just like town turkey, only
it
a
was
little stronger.
Delicious. It was absolutely delicious. And
We
she
had one for
handles all that
Thanksgiving.
cooking on those birds and everything. I slit their throats.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's my job.
and we're both pretty darn good at plucking at this point.
And getting our scalding times and temperatures down.
Scalding. It was a lot more complicated, and you always have to do like that. Every time when we get ready to scald, we have to do like one practice bird because he doesn't turn out right to get the temperature.
But we did send birds this year to relatives.
Yeah.
To Sloan's sister Sarah and my sister and aunt and uncle.
For them
So-
to give it a try for cooking them.
Right.
But
And we've heard back from my sister, and she said it was a very good meal. It was really good. Sarah, our sister, Sloan's sister, my
sister.
daughter, is going to cook one between now and Christmas, and she got the biggest bird of all. I mean, when we
packed it up and sent it to her.
when we pulled him out of the
Freezer.
chicken coop to take him over and butcher him, it was all we could do to carry him.
He was so heavy.
He was so heavy and so big, so we sent him to her, and she's going to get to practice on the big boy. So we did an 18-pound bird, and I can hardly wait to do more.
Yep.
I actually took the breasts and put them in the freezer because we had so much between the two
And
of
they
us.
had
to
more
eat.
breasts than I thought they would.
They had much more breast and very, very moist because of our brining. But the thing that I would like to do with them is when we have eggs, because right now our chickens are in the molt and there isn't much production for eggs, is to do turkey vegetable omelets. So I put those in the freezer and froze those breasts and bring them back out again at a different time to add them as meat with other proteins and garden vegetables and stuff.
Right, because we both have so many food sensitivities.
We do. We have food sensitivities. Speaking of which, our gardens
Yeah.
are huge to both
Yeah.
of us. This is one area where we
We-
really bond. This and the cattle.
We had to push because the grasshoppers are so awful, but every single year we're managing to get more and more growth in our gardens and get more and more produce out to sell. That's been our big thing, is to push as much produce as possible at the farmer's market. And if farmer's market was pretty tough this year because nobody's had any cash. Honestly, no cash at all. It's been tough on everybody, not just us.
But there's more for us in our root
Yeah.
cellar woodshed.
Yeah.
And so we do a lot of
we do a lot of storage and canning.
and we share it with the chickens and the turkeys. She will bake those and then those squash and then slit them down the middle and put her ration in them after they're baked, and that makes tremendous
Food value.
food value for her
It has
birds.
minerals and vitamins in it for them. They love it. You just cut it in half, bake it, stuff it full of corn or whatever, stuff it down in there so they have to go after the pumpkin flesh to eat it, then they get used to it and they start eating it. But we've been doing pretty sales this year at the farmer's market, not so great, but I'm probably going to have to do farmer's market, and I have another place in town where I talk to their business where I'm going to have to drive out there probably multiple times a week, maybe on Sundays, and set up and start selling there too. But we're trying to expand out beans this next year. We're looking at doing high tunnels, which is going to be
Expensive.
expensive and exciting, but
The reason for that is because of the hoppers. We do a lot of control with the birds, but still the hoppers. We came home last year
They're
in a day and a
vicious.
half. They had mowed down 80 hills of potatoes. They they just took the crop
they
in
destroyed
a
the
day and a
potatoes.
half. It was just unbelievably fast how fast they came in, and we had not turned the birds into the garden because the plants were smaller yet, and the birds like to eat them.
Yeah.
So by the time a day and a half was over, the hoppers had eaten everything.
It was pretty devastating.
It was horrifying. So we're looking at some crops with high tunnels in them, potatoes,
Yeah. Beans.
with carrots and beans, bush beans, and a lot of bush type crops so that there's more foliage over the top.
And the
to
grasshoppers
protect.
don't like the squash. Once they get to a certain amount of maturity, they don't tend to eat them.
No,
they just don't find
they
them palatable.
They do if they can. They don't.
If there's nothing else to eat, they will eat them. But if you can get the squash to a certain maturity, and the leaves can get a good amount of green in them, for some reason the grasshoppers don't find them as delicious, and they'll go after everything else before they go after the squash. And then we're looking at about doubling our size. I'm looking at doubling our size of the squash patch because that's been our biggest sellers. And obviously what we could actually get to grow out here that wasn't destroyed by the grasshoppers. So buttercups are our bigger sellers.
The reason we started the garden in the first place,
Yeah.
and that changed so fast that we almost forget the why of the inception. We started because of the drought and not having fresh food for the cattle. And so I came from a farming and ranching background, and in that time we had drought as well, but we also had a pivot. And so we as a family had gone into cash crops. And squash for the Japanese market was one of them, kabocha squash.
Daikon too, right?
Daikon radishes were the other one. I think that was it. But the squash, in terms of getting them to Japan, was an abysmal failure. However, the cattle ate them, and really,
they did well.
yeah, they did very well. They got fat on them. I mean, the squash and the cattle were nothing but a positive mix.
Yeah,
And you did not have the pesticide. We raised sugar beets too, but we did not have the pesticide on the squash. And when you turn cattle in on fodder on farm ground to graze off what's left, the fodder that's left, big patches of squash, 20, 25 acres of squash held a lot of food value for those cows that the cows were weaned off of, to give them some nutrition in the fall and early winter. So they weren't totally on beet tops. Beet tops took a lot of their teeth out because of the soil, getting down in but the squash didn't do that as much. And the squash has orange carotene in it. Beets didn't, and beets had a high toxicity with, we used a lot of chemical on it.
Yeah.
And that was always something that we were very wary of, but it also moved into our cattle to a certain extent. You could not deny that it did. So when we looked at a different crop to feed our cattle that we could actually grow here, and we saw that awful weed patch with dirt that was 5 inches black deep, we thought that could make it. So we winter our cattle there, and we move our rounders, but we only winter them there when it's extremely cold weather.
Yeah, and they need to be out of the wind, and they need something under their bellies to keep their...
Yeah, so we bring them in where it's sheltered, and then they're close to our buildings.
And then they make a nice poopy mulch to put on top of
like
our garden.
Hugely poopy mulch. And so we absolutely use manure and organic matter in our soil building opportunities with the garden. And that's huge because when we go down, we move the mulch aside and plant a huge hill, move the mulch, hill, move the mulch, hill, and we plant and we plant and we plant until we get the whole thing planted down, because we know we're going to lose some to the hopper, so we overplant. But the mulch on top holds the soil moisture, which you get in the spring, and the snow that you've had in the winter, so you've got moisture down underneath.
Yeah, I don't have to water down there until about mid-summer.
Mid-July, late July,
Depending.
which is huge to as our water comes from the artesian well. And it's somewhat sparse. We've looked at maybe pumping out of the creek to bring it up more and to increase our acreage under production.
Yeah.
But we haven't gotten that far yet.
Right.
This year we cleared about every 3 years we bring in manure spreaders.
Yeah.
The neighbors will come in
we
for
have
hire
with
machinery, and so we spread the manure on this year on
the top section,
top breeding pasture that we have next to the house, because we put a bull there with a 2-year-old bull with these heifers there, and we needed those breeding statistics on them, so they were just right out the front door. But that area also needed nutrition, so we took and put all of our manure on that particular pasture.
It really needed help. It needed a lot of help.
And it greened up. So we use manure organically. We build it, we spread it, we use it for growth. We begin the cycle of life.
And that's everything we cleaned out of the corrals. And when we first took over, there was 20 years worth of manure stacked up there. And Grandma and Grandpa had never gotten it spread, did they? I don't think they ever spread it.
No.
So we hired the Bells, Bob Bell down the road, and they cleaned out 20 years worth of manure that Grandma and Grandpa had just piled up on our upper pasture, and it made a difference.
And we started a house garden.
Yeah.
That area just south of my house, which is 8 feet away from the wall, we had them haul in 6 loads of manure and just dump it.
Yes. Just put it there. and we kind of spread it out as best we could, and then we put a fence up, and then
We put chickens on it.
we put chickens on
And the
it.
chickens did their chicken thing.
Yep, and they got in and ate all the cutworms. I've hardly found a single cutworm in there since.
That's true.
There were so
noticed
many
that this
cutworms
summer.
in that dirt. I only found one cutworm when I was digging around behind the chicken coop, and it was this big. And I went, "Here, chickens." But beyond that, they ate all the cutworms. They dug them up and ate them.
Mm-hmm.
It was just great because they were eating my. I think they were eating our tomatoes before. Just terrible. They were trying to eat all the tomato
Chickens
roots.
do really like tomatoes, and they're hard on them.
They
They
do.
eat the whole thing. They are really hard on them. But yeah, we're trying to advance our soil
And our cows, the cattle.
and our cattle and integrate the whole thing.
Because we have to raise everything. It's not like I can go out and buy a full-blood Simmental. They don't exist. We have to breed our own.
Right. And we have gone to Iowa for semen and to northern Canada
Yep.
for semen. And so we have new
And it's
things coming,
expensive.
and it is expensive. And we have new things coming in our herd that each time we calve out, we're so excited because it's almost like Christmas. Christmas isn't really in December, it's in
Yeah.
April.
Yeah, it's springtime when the babies come. You have to make sure everything's all right and you're ready to catch a calf.
And our
'Cause they're
matings,
so sweet. They're such sweet babies.
we have matings that we talk about
Yeah, we
in advance.
yes.
9 months in advance, or a year in advance of what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. So with that, we have a lot of camaraderie. We have it over the garden. We
Yes.
actually both really enjoy the garden.
Yes.
Um,
And planting the garden.
and I can tell you that I enjoy the turkeys much more since I've gotten to eat one. They just seem like a lot of problems because they poop all over my front step,
Oh yeah.
and that's just kind of
It's
annoying.
not so bad in the winter. They've been hanging away from the front steps.
No,
It's
and
cold.
they're pretty good about that.
Yeah.
But I told Sloane a long time ago this summer, and we had put them in the freezer last winter, that I'd really like to eat one, but we didn't get around to it till just this last
This
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving, we had
And they
one.
are delicious.
They're
I'm
really
all
good.
for having more turkeys, like a whole freezer full of turkey. That's a turkey a week would be good.
Yeah, but we're gonna have to push them hard on the squash patch this year to make sure our guys don't get eaten. But to end on a positive note, I read the other day that 98% of farms fail in the first 5 years. And since we incorporated in 2019, 2024 is 5 years. So we beat the statistics.
Well, we have, and one thing that I don't know, I grew up with a farm loan.
Yeah.
Every year we had to meet the farm loan, and Sloane and I do not have a farm loan.
Yeah, we've been trying hard not to have to take out any loans, but we've been busting our butts.
So we operate on what we have and what we make and
Yep.
what we can earn. And so we do that within our budget, and we're always trying to blow our budget because we want other things. But if we blow our budget, it's on something that we can use, like
Yeah.
Bull in Canada that
Yeah, getting the semen in, getting it in storage.
she's still
I'm
not
antsy.
convinced
I'm
not
antsy
convinced
about-
that was a good investment, but
We'll see what the calves look like
I'm
this spring.
hoping that
It'll
yes,
it'll
it
really
pans
help
out.
in terms of genetic stock.
So there's some things like that I can say, coming from a agricultural background, we have never had a farm loan, either that's good, bad, or indifferent. I do have an off-farm job, and Sloane is in school with her GI Bill.
Yep. Which
To
helps
help
a
her.
lot with bills.
It helps a lot with bills, and that's something that we don't want to explore. We don't want to live beyond our means. We want our means to increase
Right.
in
I think most farms fail when they overestimate what they can produce with a loan. I think that's
Right.
where they really get in trouble.
or if you don't work like a dog on all the extras that come
Right.
along, and you think you can take a day off and you can't.
Yeah.
You just can't. So we want to say that we, in spite of some days of not maybe being as comfortable as what we would like to be, we're both committed to gardening, fowl, guard dogs,
The farm.
incredible Simmental herd that we really enjoy. We
Yeah.
enjoy our cattle, and we enjoy the dirt.
Yeah.
And the place we live in Montana is positioned so that we're happy. We're just very happy.
Yeah. I just wish we could get more sales. That's the only thing. But it's what it is. I'm hoping that this next year, hey, maybe some laws will change and we can get more opportunities to get in and produce organic food. And I would love to do raw milk, but there's a lot of red tape with that.
I would love if I thought I could run for office and make country of origin labeling a reality.
Yeah, that's a big one.
A reality if they would actually label country of origin.
Yeah, it's huge.
It is so important to the growth of agriculture.
Yeah.
I do think when I listen to the people in town and they are so far away from dirt and agriculture and fresh food that
Even in an agricultural community, they don't get how hard it is.
No, if you had country of origin in a restaurant, say a family goes out for a nice meal and they could actually know if their meat was raised in the United States
Or Brazil.
or what it had in it, if it was railroad or growth hormone or raised organically. You hear a lot of talk about a lot of things, but you don't actually get to taste it on your fork.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's huge to be able to provide that type of experience and that eating quality and that lifestyle quality to our consumers.
Yeah.
Which I hope are paying consumers,
Yeah.
because that would make small farms like ours thrive.
Yeah, it would. But that's all we have for tonight. Thank you so much.
Yep, very much.
Bye.
Bye.